I think that I'm one of the most idealistic people that I know, and that's a source of great fulfillment, but it's also a source of great disappointment because you have this constant curiosity and expectation, and then the reality doesn't live up to what you've imagined.
And if I'm imagining, it's happening. It's insane. So the thrill and the buzz, like the planning, is almost usually better than when things happen. Not sexually speaking, but traveling, for example, I can get so disappointed.
The Big Hormone Enneagram.
Hi, I'm John Lukovich, sexual self-pres for the 5-wing 458 trifix.
Hi, I'm David Gray, self-pres sexual 9 with 1 974 trifix.
What up? It's Emeka. I'm an 8-wing 7, sexual self-pres with 854 fixes.
Hi, I'm Nancy. I am a self-pres social 3, wing 4 with a 369 trifix. If you like our podcast, guys, make sure you go like and subscribe us on the Apple Podcast app. And if you really like us, you should definitely leave us a review.
Well, finally, we have the last fucking type
interview
that we're going to do for a long time.
That everybody's been asking for.
Yeah, I'm fucking sick of
saving
having
the best for last.
Yeah, right.
Obviously.
Nobody cares about
disappoint.
Yeah, it's either that or no one cares.
You know, the thing is, nobody mistypes at 7. If you think you're a 7,
true.
you're a fucking 7. So it's like,
I don't know. There's some crazy 9s. You know these 9s.
Yeah. Always the 9s.
Welcome to the Big Hormone Enneagram. We're here today with our type 7s who we finally were able to get on the podcast. But before we get into introductions, I'd like to say real quick, very soon we're going to do a recap call about the type interview series that we've been doing. And if you've been following along and you have questions and comments that you'd like us to cover, hit us up on Instagram at Big Hormone. Slide into our DMs and send us your questions, your comments, and we'll cover them on that episode. And if you haven't been following us on Instagram at Big Hormone, get your shit together. Follow us on Instagram.
All right, so I'm Fernanda, sexual social 7-wing 6, 741 trifix. And where people can find me, I'm on Instagram. My name Fernanda Spinelli, Spinelli. And I graduated in psychology, then I post-graduated in transpersonal psychology. I worked with that for a long time as a psychotherapist, but not fully happy with that, I must say, because I really felt I couldn't create. And simultaneously, I've always taught languages, and I love writing. It's really what I like doing the most. So lately, I've been really focusing on this. And I was going to publish a book, but then coronavirus came. It's ready, and very soon it's going to...
What's the book on?
Well, it's poetry.
Cool.
Yeah.
And you live in Brazil, right?
Yes, I do. I'm Brazilian, and I live in Brazil.
And my name's Colleen. I'm a social self-pres 7 with a 6, 7, 9, heart in dispute. You can find me at Grim Crab. I almost never post on social media.
We got to let the creeps know where you're at so they can find you.
Yeah, and I just finished law school, so going into practicing law, hopefully if I pass the bar.
Colleen has been like a long time friend of mine, and she is one of the co-conspirators who introduced the Enneagram to me.
Cool.
And Fernanda, I know, well, we didn't really know each other well, but I knew of her like 10 years ago on Catherine's page, Enneagram.
Catherine Favre?
Yeah. Back when Catherine was highly involved and she was doing like an Oscar, type the Oscars thing. And that's actually when I was like, what the hell is this? Like, what is this? And so one of the few people I saw posting heavily on that page was Fernanda.
I thought I was a 4 then. And it took me a long time to realize I wasn't. A long time, really.
What made you realize that you weren't?
It was really, I can't remember vividly. I was in the living room trying to work, and I was being bombarded by happy ideas of what I was going to do in the future on the weekend, but it was way too much. It was blocking me from producing. And then I thought, what if I'm a fucking 7? What if I'm a sexual 7? Because like it was really a lot, I was really, really being entertained by that, and and then I thought, no, I can't be. I would have had sex with more people if I was a 7. I wouldn't wear black as often as I do if I were a 7. I wouldn't be so sensitive. I wouldn't be as deep as I consider myself to be.
She considers herself.
Yeah. Yeah. I would have bad taste or maybe worse taste. So misconceptions, right? So, and then I didn't realize I was a 7. I just had a glimpse. And it took me more 2 years I don't know how, I just started crying. I just had like the click and cried. It was devastating.
I think that's you bring up a lot of really good points about how 7 is stereotyped.
Yeah.
And all like people that really ought to know better that have been teaching the Enneagram for a long time will teach and understand the 7 as like lighthearted and fun all the time.
Yeah.
And not having bad feelings for very long and being insensitive or like you said, like let's fuck everybody,
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, we all like can find examples of every type that sort of lives out a really crude caricature. But yeah, like 7s are very sensitive, and 7s have a lot of depth and feeling and dimensionality. And it sort of speaks to what an Enneagram type is, because it's not like when we think of a type, we just think of a kind of person in a vague way. But that a personality type is a defense mechanism. And it's a way of handling things, and it's not a measurement of your depth. It's a measurement of how you cope with certain things. And I mean, in the last couple years, I always bring this up when I teach, is that there have been a lot of very high profile suicide by type 7s, like celebrities.
Yep.
Some of them you can tell were spiraling out of control and suffering, but a lot of them you couldn't always tell. But obviously they're feeling something incredibly deeply and very sensitive to something and feeling unable to cope with something. And it's like, it's not because they're shallow people.
Yes, definitely. Well, I usually disappear from people. The sadder I feel, the less people see. And it's not because I want to sustain an image. It's just because I don't want to bother people.
Right.
I think.
Yeah, I think that's a 7 thing, is that there's some unconscious obligation to the collective that you're supposed to keep things up.
Yes. Ever since I was really little, I really had this super ego message telling me, like, you have to really be a presence of light and make people feel good. And it's insane.
Yeah, I was just gonna like add on to that it's like the presence of light thing, but also just like not detracting, like not being a burden, like in no way being burdensome, and like the thing that you need and are supposed to contribute is good stuff. And if you have any bad stuff, then that's not worth contributing.
Exactly.
That's interesting.
Precisely.
It's almost 2-ish in a weird inverted way.
Yeah.
It sort of sounds like the right and wrong of 1 going on, like the black and
good
white
point.
of 1.
True.
Yeah. I also really related to what you said about like kind of being distracted by like your anticipation. Like I think for me, anticipation is almost like a drug. Like once I start like anticipating and getting excited about something, like I can just ride that. And then the thing actually happens, and it's like it requires a lot for it to live up to the anticipation of it, and for me to not just immediately jump to the next thing that I'm like excited about.
How does that play out for you in social in terms of
she gets very excited to see me.
We know, John.
Of course.
You are the gift, after all.
And she's let down every single time.
I know. Major disappointment.
Speaking from a really strictly like social self-pres perspective, like for me, what John was talking to earlier is that like kind of sense of purpose and like contribution. And it's really easy for me to like change the channel on like what I think that I should be like contributing in the moment based on like what what is going on or what sparks my interest in that moment. So I don't have that like ability to sustain as much because I can be really distracted. So like I'm in law school for environmental law, but I have done like almost everything but environmental law. Like some of my jobs have been related to that, but I like wrote this paper on like privacy ethics because I was like really interested in that. And so I haven't like had that kind of sustained focus. And I think that's because I can just get excited about like so many different things.
Well,
And I'll just like jump on that train for however long it's fun.
what I've noticed about Colleen, and you can correct me, of course, but like knowing you that like you like studied like environmental science, and you did all like Peace Corps, and but there was always this like sense of wanting to do something, but like as soon as you sort of like start to focus in on something that you wanted to do that you thought would be like useful to the planet, it would kind of change. Like I always got the like got the sense that like I'd be like, what is Colleen doing now? I don't know. Like it was hard for me to pin down what the fuck you were doing because it always seemed to like, oh, well, I'm doing this and now I'm doing this program to do this, but it would always kind of change.
Yeah, I mean, and I think it's like part of that is like the further into something I get, the like less exciting it is. I don't know. I don't know if that's like the right word, but it's like not wanting to like dive into something completely and like close out the other options of like, well, what if I am interested in something that's not related?
Possibilities and options is a big deal with 7. I've got a secondary 7 fix, and I can just get high on the possibilities of multiple different things, and never do the thing or any of the things. Yeah.
How does that show up for you, Fernanda, in your sexual attraction drive, the sort of pattern of anticipation and getting excited and then maybe being disappointed when it actually shows up?
Well, there's a lot of imagination at play. It's really almost as if I'm imagining, it's happening. It's insane. So the thrill and the buzz, like the planning is almost usually better than when things happen, not sexually speaking, but traveling, for example. I can get so disappointed when I get to the place and, like, when I went to Disney, like I was a teenager, like, oh, I can't believe, because it's just like that. It's material. And
it's not free. It's not free. It's bound to matter in time and space.
I really don't know what I imagined, really. Yeah, but I relate to what she was saying, that with the options things, like even professionally, well, I've have 3 different professions going on, and I always feel that if I stick to one, I would be betraying myself somehow. I don't know if that makes sense.
Totally. I just finished law school like, a month ago, and already I'm like, well, maybe I should just get a forestry degree. Like, maybe I should. And like that thought is already entering my mind of like, this isn't going to be satisfying. Like, what else should I do?
I want to say a little bit about 7s for the folks listening, just because most people learn about 7s as that zany type that is fun-loving and likes variety and, is always positive. And there's a kernel of something, truthful in there, but it's obviously much more complicated, So 7s are they kind of represent the versatility and freedom of the awake mind. They tend to be experience-oriented. They're spontaneous often. They often do have an optimistic outlook. They love possibilities. And there's a way that I've experienced 7s where a lot of people say that 7s avoid negativity. I don't think that's true. I see that at least for healthy 7s or secure 7s, that they often try to bring a certain kind of hopefulness to often hopeless or seemingly hopeless situations. It's like kind of like trying to bring the light where there's darkness. And also 7s are very pleasure seeking, but there can be a way in which they can not avoid negative feelings, but I think giving time for certain, I call them limiting feelings. It's not that 7s don't feel negativity and sadness and anger, but when it comes to things like grief and depression and these kind of feeling states that take a long time to unfold, I think creates a lot of anxieties for type 7. And they can try to jump ahead or jump out of the feeling of being trapped in these kinds of heavy long passing feelings. And so 7s have a very particular relationship to boredom. There's a lot of anxiety in boredom. And I think I remember Russ and Tim McLean, who's co-teacher at the Enneagram Institute with Russ. He lives in Japan, but he's a type 7. I remember them describing transition objects. So like when a little kid is, when a mother is learning to be to give a kid a little bit of space, and the kid's starting to kind of be on its own, not just clinging to mom all the time as an infant, mom will sometimes give the kid a toy or an object to distract the kid so that they don't get anxious about separating from mom. And this is called a transition object. And in some sense, there is a way that the type 7 is looking for and has a kind of a struggle with finding inner guidance around what's going to deeply nourish their heart. It's going to really satisfy them. And there's a way in which the psyche gets trained around finding transition objects, different possibilities, different experiences, different people that might be that thing that's going to nourish me. But it's like what's often not understood about 7 is that we all know 6 has a hard time being certain in some ways, and it's often harder to see where type 7s lack certainty, and where that head center 5, 6, and 7 are head types. Where that head center difficulty presents itself in the 7 is I don't know what's going to satisfy me. And so a lot of the wanting to try things and to get out of things, it's because I don't want to limit the options that where I might find something satisfying, something nourishing, something that's going to awaken me or bring about that fulfilling experience. And so underneath the 7's mercurial qualities and experience seeking is often a lot of suffering, where the heart feels starved. And a lot of the more compulsive behaviors of type 7s are ways in which the heart is trying to be fed, but like looking in all the wrong places, not knowing what's going to really feed my heart. And so I was wondering if either of y'all have anything that what I just said sparks for y'all.
It's really what happens, and it's the search is insane. And but the problem is that you get a thrill out of that, because you are there in the balloon. And it goes, and it kind of course, it's the ego. It emulates that fulfillment. Yeah. But when you reach the second chapter, you face the consequences, and you're not really fulfilled, and the thing keeps going on. But for me, the biggest challenge is that it brings a sort of satisfaction. And I don't know if that happens with all types. For example, type 6, when they feel anxious, I don't know if they really have fun by feeling that way. But with me, while I'm they're like, wow, like it feels good. And this is a problem.
So say more about like what the thrill or that satisfaction that is a problem. Can you speak more to it being a problem?
Yeah, because it's not fulfilling, and you end up getting disappointed because there's so much idealism, in my process, so as I was telling you, the imagination, and then it's never enough. It feels it's never enough. It feels good, but it's not enough. So it's never totally fulfilling. But then I think, but if I relax, I'm gonna become boring, and I'll become dull, and this is a challenge for me.
So are you saying that the thrill of trying things and anticipating things is on one hand kind of addicting, or there's something you get out of it, but at the same time at the higher cost of still feeling that lack of fulfillment, and that's where the conflict arises?
Yes.
Yeah, to build on that, I think that I'm one of the most idealistic people that I know, and that's a source of great fulfillment, but it's also a source of great disappointment, because you have this constant curiosity and expectation, and then the reality doesn't live up to what you've imagined. Mm-hmm. And so then you move to the next thing.
So this makes me think of type 7 as a frustration type. I think each of those types have some sort of idealism built in, correct?
Yeah, you're talking 1s, 4s, and 7s.
Yes.
Yeah, so what Emeka is referring to is object relations theory, and there's 3 dominant affects in object relations theory, which is frustration, attachment, and rejection. And if you've listened to our past lengthy excavations on the Bermuda Triangle types, 9, 3, and 6, those are attachment types. But 4, 7, 1 are frustration, and so the dominant affect is frustration. And so 4 is frustration with both the nurturing figure and the protecting figure. So it results in I'm going to push away from the outer world and go inward to find myself. The type 1 is frustration with the protective figure. And part of the role of the protective figure is to create structure and order. And so the one psyche is kind of like, well, you didn't do a good enough job, so I'm going to do it myself. And I'm feeling frustrated because the order and the structure and the way things should be is not happening. For the 7, it's frustration with the nurturing figure. And so I didn't get the nourishment, I didn't get the fulfillment, I didn't get the thing I needed to feel satisfied. And so I'm going to go out and look for it and find it. And so, yeah, what you guys are both speaking to, I was going to bring up the same point as Emeka, is that I can hear that sort of frustration quality where there's like, I want to taste, but I can't savor.
Yeah, it's kind of like I think of 7 maybe at the worst, or like in average health, as like the Greek myth of Tantalus, where he has like all of the fruit and all of the water, but he can't reach or drink any of it. It's kind of like it's there to see and to perceive, but you can't be satisfied by it. That is like a very 7 feeling.
So when it comes to people that know 7s, like, I mean, often it can seem like I know you well enough, Colleen, to know when you're feeling that frustration. But I think if I didn't know you so well, I wouldn't intuit that you're feeling that, because that's sort of a dark picture, right? And people don't see that dark quality in 7 very often. So like, what's happening there where people might be experiencing the 7 as more buoyant or optimistic or positive than maybe they're actually feeling?
I think that has to do with the reframing and the ability to divert from that frustration, like especially the reframing. That really resonates with me. Like something shitty is happening and I'm feeling deprived, but like, hey, I can just like do this other thing that will like distract me from that.
So when something presents itself as frustrating, the reframing is sort of talking yourself into feeling something different than you're actually feeling.
Turning to a different thing.
Is it just turning your attention, or is it also kind of like giving yourself a talk of talking yourself out of the state that you're in?
I think it's a little bit of both for me.
Yeah, for me too, both.
Or is it a thing where you don't, it's like if you're in public or you're around people that you can't allow yourself to put any negative darkness out into the world, so you can't process negativity around other people? Is that a thing?
I do that a lot. I complain a lot. I don't know if I'm the most well-liked person. I can be really critical and yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I fight in the supermarket. I do, but then it's really like the extreme. Then I'm really stressed.
You're also triple frustration, 1, 4, and 7. So, yeah.
I tell people off like you shouldn't be doing that. Like.
For the listeners out there, if you're in Brazil and you want to fight, at the supermarket.
That's something that's probably surprising to me about 7s is that 7s can be surprisingly pretty critical, in contrast to how enthusiastic they can be. That line, the 1 does show up that a 7 can all of a sudden just be super critical and just go at people.
So, it feels like a split personality. It has happened like 1,000 times. Oh, but you seem so easygoing. You seem so nice and loud. You seem like, no, you're not. What's going on? I was not faking, in that moment I was feeling positive and you were cooperating. Now you're not cooperating.
And that's a great observation, because there like I find a spectrum of 7s where they can be very attentive and kind and generous, and then there's a certain line that's crossed and suddenly it's like very me first, and it's like you're no longer either interesting or going along with what needs to happen or moving in the right direction, and suddenly there's like whiplash because this personality has changed so quickly. And it's often, I think, really unexpected, coming from, like a very friendly, buoyant person. All of a sudden, it's like really kind of harsh and kind of it's somebody coming hard down on you. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, critical. They just get really, all of a sudden, really critical. It can feel selfish to some degree. It's like, the thing that I want that might satisfy me isn't happening, and you're the cause of it. And I'm going to tell you how you're fucking things up. And it gets really one-ish in that kind of way. Like the thing that's supposed to happen right now isn't happening.
Yeah, because for me, it feels like the line has been I drew the line for me, but I didn't say the, like the limit. And then the person might cross that, whatever limit it is. And then, hey, why did you do that? You shouldn't be doing that. But it's not something I state, if you do that, or it's just because it seems just so friendly. And so I'm used because like I like people, I really like people. I find people fascinating most of the time until I get frustrated, consciously frustrated.
Colleen.
Sevens are jerks.
Yes.
I don't know what y'all are talking about.
If we leave this call with any conclusion, is that people should not like sevens.
They're asses.
What were you saying, Nancy?
Oh, I was just asking if Colleen relates to that.
I don't ever go to one, so I don't know what that's like.
I think in the past, like Colleen, like we've talked about the 9 influence in your personality. And I remember one time, like years ago, we were like, well, what if you're actually a 9, not a 7? And it's the clearest way that we know that you're a 7. What's very clear is Colleen's lines to 5 and 1. And I mean, besides being a head type, those directions are very clear in Colleen.
And part of that, I think, is like the social self-pres 7 tends to come off as 1-ish just because of what that stacking looks like. But I think I have a pretty strong line to 1. And I think that a lot of that has to do with like you have an idea of the experience that you're going to have. And then I can't remember, I think Emiko is saying something like someone like gets in the way of that experience. And it's like, that's kind of what triggers it for me.
Fuck you.
They get the wrath.
Totally. Like, well, that's not right. But it's like, well, that's not what I wanted is really what it is.
So it's just purely selfish. That's what that is.
Yeah, totally.
Framed as that's not right.
You're not right that you're getting in the way of my fun experience. How dare you?
Well, considering this line from 7 to 1, something that I've experienced, I mean, with Colleen, but also other 7s in my life, is guilt. Feeling guilty for being indulgent, or feeling guilty for sort of running over people sometimes to get what I want, or also feeling guilty because I'm doing what feels good at the moment, not doing what I should be doing. And so there's this tension that I've seen a lot of 7s that I don't see described in many places about like where guilt is a and also even earlier we're talking about like I need to present myself to people in a way that is at least upbeat in some sense.
Yeah, I relate to that 100%. I thought it was just me. I didn't even think it was really a 7 thing, Wow, when I really hurt people that are really important to me and I upset them, it's devastating. It takes me really days to forgive myself. I'm going to beat myself up endlessly. And people forgive me before I forgive myself. So I'm really hard on myself, really. So,
yeah, that resonates.
Yeah, so I think it's mainly in relationships, but I feel guilty also if I'm not doing. I have the sense of mission. Like, I don't feel I'm really like running out of time. I'm not doing what I should be doing. Listening to music, I should be reading a book, from beginning to end instead of like reading 1,000 books up until the middle of the book and getting bored. But I feel really guilty. I feel like, what am I doing with my life?
Yeah, I resonate with that. But I think there's also like, so I'm trying to think of like a specific example. So like my partner was pretty ill for a long time. And for me, that was sort of like, there were a lot of feelings of guilt wrapped up in that because it was something that required my full attention. And if I wasn't able to get, like I expected to be able to give that. And then when I couldn't, there was like this desire to like punish myself for not being able to like remain buoyant and like still do everything that I would have been doing had that not been the situation. And then there was like guilt for the negative feelings that I was having and like having a hard time expressing. And that would usually end up, that sort of like desire to punish would usually end up in like being critical of myself and sometimes like people around me.
And sometimes it seems like it would be almost like penance for indulgence.
Right.
Almost.
And it's like you go to this place where it's like good things are not deserved, they're earned kind of thing, which yeah, and like penance for indulgence too, totally.
I have a good 7 friend who we were just talking about a story earlier tonight, my family and I, about I like in the house I live now. Before I lived there, it was like a bunch of people were living there, and one of my friends, and he met these dudes at a bar, and like Alara and I were like crashing on these couches, and he brought these guys in, and they ended up like he was drunk, and they were doing all this other stuff, and I was like half asleep, and they stole a bunch of shit, like they stole my wallet and phone and my friend's computer. After that, this friend felt so he's a 7, he felt so guilty. He like stopped drinking for like years, and it was just like he did a bunch of other stuff. I can't remember, but it was like hard hitting the brakes. You know, it was like hard self restraint to kind of make up for the indulgence of that night and all the ways that it had consequences for his friend.
Yeah, that's interesting. That tension between 7 and 1, which can seem like opposites, but shows up a lot in 7s. And I wonder if this is more apparent for 7 wing 6 than 7 wing 8. This sort of guilt around indulgence.
I was gonna say
Yeah.
6s have that anti-narcissistic gene kind of thing
Mhm.
that might, and both of you are 7 wing 6, so a 7 wing 8 might feel differently about indulging themselves.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. What do you think, David?
7 wing 8s seem like they're more critical, and I see them sort of as
Anti-guilt.
yeah, pretty anti-guilt.
Well, it seems like they externalize the one-ishness more than 7 wing
Yeah.
6s, which internalize it more.
Yeah.
What do you
That-
what do you mean by externalize it?
Well, like they might more criticize you for something you're doing wrong.
Oh,
I
okay.
mean,
Yeah.
the one-ish thing is to criticize oneself, but I think that a lot of that immediately goes through the filter of other person, much easier than 7 wing 6. Because with that
Right.
6 wing, there's a little bit of masochism built in.
And the 8
Mhm.
is avoiding vulnerability, right?
Exactly.
So it's spewing it out.
I relate to both things you're saying, like to the outside and to the inside, but it might be because I have 1 in the tri-type. So I do the 1 also externally, but I still relate more to the masochistic, like blaming myself thing way more.
I think 7 wing 8s can really I feel like seem a lot different than 7 wing 6s in the way they handle other people, just in terms of how separated they might be from criticism and how forceful they might be in comparison to 7 wing 6s. That 6 wing really tempers 7 a lot in my experience.
Yeah, they almost sometimes don't look like 7s to me.
Oh yeah.
7 wing 6s.
I think that when I first figured out my type too, I kind of felt like I was like the discount 7, because like you read the descriptions and it's like so fun, like really
Aw.
fun loving, like really outgoing. And I like between the 6 wing and the social self pres, I was like, damn it, I don't get any of the like fun impulsiveness. Like I don't know. I mean, I do.
The
But, like,
dollar
I was
store
like,
7.
I am
Yeah,
stealing that. That is so funny.
Oh shit. It's like
We
the
got a
7
dollar store 7 and a dollar store 3.
ruined by your wing and your stacking.
Yeah, that reminds me of when we did the 3 call. I think it was Katie that was saying that she felt like she was a failure 3 or something along those
Yeah,
lines.
yeah.
The worst
Mhm.
3.
The worst 3 because she, had all these factors that made her less like boldly achievement oriented.
Yeah. She said she didn't feel like she was good enough to be a 3.
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah, that is,
Not 3 enough to be a 3.
I feel like there's always one of those types in a number.
I can definitely relate to that to some degree. I think I can feel pretty useless as an 8. I'm very
yeah. Emika's definitely
Not
the useless 8.
I have very, very specific use, and it's not really useful to the external world in not in much of a way. Do an Enneagram podcast. That's it.
So one of the things that I wanted to get to is the role of the instincts, because like Colleen being a social 7. So when people hear about like social 7, I think that they assume like, guys, we're all gonna get lit together, and this sort of social butterfly. And I think that can happen, but obligation and service is a big part of the social instinct.
Contribution.
And contribution, and Colleen, I was wondering if you could say a few things about contribution and obligation and 7, and how they come together and how they create conflict.
Well, I mean, I think I've told you before, like, I always kind of feel like I have this sense of duty that doesn't necessarily serve me because it,
Yep.
like, in some ways conflicts with my desire for freedom. But I definitely have a really, really strong desire to contribute and do something important with my life. And I've always sort of felt like if I could just do this, then that would be important and that would be like meaningful and that would be satisfying. It would be satisfying to create meaning.
And Fernanda, how do you experience that sense of like with the sexual instinct, and what's the frustration there, and how do they conflict or how they go together with the 7?
I think it's really about like the ultimate infatuation, and this is something like, because I remember when I mistyped as 4, that sexual 4s were called like infatuation type. And I've always really been totally, that's my drug. Not really falling in love, but before falling in love is really that strong attraction and that thing that is you want more. And like when you commit with a person, there's a sense of like, I even have nightmares dating other people because no, maybe with someone else I could be experiencing something bigger and stronger. And it's so narcissistic, right? It's not love. It feels good.
Do you end up burning through relationships, or does it even get to a relationship point?
No, I do get to the relationship point, and I'm usually not the one to leave. Because I get attached, and I'm really loyal.
So what's
but there's always that sense that I might be missing out something stronger. I don't know if that makes sense. It's crazy, right?
No. So can you say something about the conflict between attachment and then feeling like that frustration of missing out?
I think I rationalize, like I feel that, but then I, put it under the rug because I have that bond with that person, so it's a conflict,
Right. And also I wonder if like knowing the Enneagram and knowing your type might make you think like, oh, well, that's just me being a sexual 7, or that's just me like wanting an out. Like, do you feel that? No,
I don't think so. No, because even when I thought it was a 4, I felt that, so very consciously.
Yeah. I'll say this about the sexual 7s that I have noticed, that sort of dichotomy of kind of always having their foot outside the door a little bit, but still being very attached and loyal in their relationships. I see that happen a lot, or at least the one sexual 7 that I had a lot of experience with. And I think that says something about sexual types. Once they're hooked and into someone, regardless of how they might be feeling that they might be attracted to someone else, there can be a sense of just, I'm already like hooked into this thing with someone, and it's going to be difficult to pull myself away from it. So I do see that sort of conflict with sexual 7s of idealizing a love, even though they're still kind of always considering other options. Is that something you relate to, Fernanda?
100%. Yes. And really idealizing, really seeing the best in the person and trying to save that relationship way longer than I should, because like it's not okay today, but I think it's okay. And when I think it's not okay, we're going to make it work. So I end up really in really long-term relationships. And when it ends, I thought, why didn't he dump me before? Why did I do that to him? Because it was not good. But I was convincing myself it was good.
Is it that you don't want to cause pain? You don't want to cause pain by breaking up, or what is? Because I mean, 7s can seem pretty frustrated when they're not getting their way, but it seems like, at least with sexual and 7, that I'm surprised sometimes to see how devoted sexual 7s can be in relationships, given how distractible and flighty they are.
I think it's because there is the love and the friendship, and then there is attraction. And at the beginning, these things, they walk together. But at a certain point, you believe you're still ultimately attracted to that person, but you're not. But I tried to convince myself that's going on. But then, because I'm social 2nd, right? So there's the bond, and there's the friendship, and there's the story, the history we've built.
Well, I'm interested by this thing about like trying to talk yourself into attraction, and sort of it sounds like a battle between the mental center and the heart center and the instinct. And when like I have a friend who's a sexual 7, and one of the things I've gleaned from just getting to know him is that a lot of like the romantic partners are sort of seen like almost in an idealized way, even if it's like they're dark, like even if it sounds negative, it's sort of like there's a view of them as sort of like the portal to a mysterious world, or like a character that like leads you into a more fascinating story, or like getting off on what a caricature or character that a romantic partner might present as. Does that resonate?
Yes, a lot. And what I do like with the attractions that I might feel for other guys is like, oh, I rationalize, oh no, but he's not so good in this, and that. No, he's not a guy, like I start seeing flaws in the person, but it just to justify that it's better to remain with that one. And so the partner is idealized and the others are like, no, not as good as the other one. So that's what helps me forget, and stick to that one.
So when you're in a committed relationship, it's like the imagination is what keeps you idealizing that partner as like, this is the one, and everyone else is flawed, but the person I'm with is like an idealized animated character in your mind. Is that what's going on?
No, not really, because if the guy's really a jerk, I'm not. I've had good boyfriends overall.
Okay.
I've had good partners. So no.
So it's not that if they're a bad boyfriend, you could still be real about that, or is it that your imagination would keep you there longer than you normally would?
No, it only happened once with a bad boyfriend. I was really young, and he was really manipulative, and he did a great job into manipulating me. So I really think I was like really inexperienced, and I was really in love. But with all the others, it just really like this component of exchange going on. Like it's alive. A relationship is something. It's alive. Yeah, it's not dead. It's not like just my imagination.
That's interesting. There is kind of a life infusion theme, I think, with 7. Like you're anti-death, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
With 7, you're wanting to pump things with life in some certain way. It's very abstract, but
yeah, that makes sense.
I love that. I think that one of the like great qualities of 7 at their best is just like vitality.
Mhm.
Like just this source of vitality.
Yeah.
To kind of put a dark spin on that, David, you use an analogy when you're kind of doing like an explanation of the types, at least with certain types of the cycles of the sun.
Mm-hmm.
And when you explain that, I kind of put you kind of put 7 as like the setting sun, and in my mind, it always kind of means like they're very aware that there's an end and they don't want that end to happen. Like
And
they
the colors
see
are
the sun
beautiful.
setting. Yeah, the colors are beautiful and they want it to stay that way. And they see the sun setting and it's like, oh my God, that can't happen. Kind of a
Yeah.
like we have to pump life back into this day.
Yeah. The sunny optimism is on its way out. So I need to, and it's beautiful and colorful, and it's more colorful at that time of day.
Mm-hmm.
And but it's going away. Mm-hmm. So it's getting more attractive, but it's going away. So there's a frustration piece right there.
This gets on. I wanted to ask about time and death because, picking up on what y'all were speaking to earlier about like when I asked about guilt, I can't remember if it was Colleen or Fernanda, but brought up feeling guilty that I'm spending my time and energy here, but not here. And I think 7s really feel the ticking of time really intensely. So how's your experience of time and cramming things in, or like limiting experience and all that kind of stuff feel?
Yeah, I feel that time passes faster through me.
I think that sense of time thing is a pretty deeply unconscious thing, generally. You don't realize that when you've got a faster timeline, right?
Oh, you do realize because of the response of others. You compare,
True.
right?
True.
You see, that's when you realize.
When you're dealing with a 9, for example.
Yes. Yeah.
It takes all day to say a sentence.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think that with how time is experienced, there's also a sense of like, is this it? Like, is that all I get?
Yeah.
Have I gotten there yet? Have I like done it yet? Like, I don't know. There's a lot of like pressure to kind of like make the most of the time that you have, and if you don't do like the things that you hope to do or dream of doing, then there's like a great sense of loss.
Yeah, I can even relate to that as having a 7 wing. I just feel like there's always a sense of there's a lot of different things that I could do, and choosing one thing means that I have to say no to a lot of other things. So that's one thing about 7s that I relate to, is that there's not enough time to squeeze out of life all the things that you could be doing, all the interesting things that you could be doing.
So is there a lot of mourning for things that are unable to be actualized?
I avoid thinking about that.
I think there is for me. Like I probably spend too much time thinking about like things that I won't be able to do that I would like to do, or things that are like out of my reach or unavailable to me. I spend probably a lot of time thinking about that.
I think it's interesting throughout this call that I sometimes forget that 7's a head type for some reason. Because I feel like head types I feel like 7s are often portrayed as this like stereotypical kind of airhead, which is not true. 7s can be just as smart as any other type.
You hear that? As smart as any other type, Colleen.
So
they've got Elon Musk to look up to.
There are better ways to say that, but you get what I'm saying. It's intellectual as any other type. But it's throughout this call, you guys have said, like living in your head is sometimes better than living in the real world, and you're thinking about mourning about these lost options, but it's just interesting how much time a 7 spends in their head, when I feel like a lot of times we see 7s as living life to the fullest, but really it's in their head a lot.
There's a lot of imagination in the head. Yeah.
Like, how do you experience yourselves? Because like as Nancy's saying, there's a lot of outward people experiencing 7s as action oriented, but where do you feel like the locus of your attention is generally on?
What I can do next or should do next, whether that's like specifically in the day or like more broadly with my life.
So like right now, are you thinking about what you're going to do when you get off the call?
I'm actually not right now, but I've actually had the sensation of like doing something and then thinking about wanting to do it like as I'm doing it. Which I think is like,
whoa,
really
that's a trip.
really like head typey like 7 thing to do. Like, you're hiking and then you're thinking about like the next hike that you're going to go on and like being excited about that or whatever it is.
With me, I really have this thing of I want to get things done. It's not really just like in my head and okay, fine. It's in my head when it's not possible to translate it into action. I think I'm very assertive, and I really believe I don't know, I might be wrong, but I really put a lot of energy in making things happen. I'm really proactive. I think
that's a difference there in gut fixes too, between 9 and 1, right there.
What advice would you give yourself that was 10 years younger or 15 years younger? What would you say to yourself to help yourself?
I mean, I don't really have anything, because I feel like I just kind of like weather the experiences and then make sense of it later. But I don't know. I don't know.
You wouldn't tell yourself your 15-year younger self some advice to help you feel better, be better?
She's done everything. She doesn't need advice.
Oh, that's got to be.
You'll get over it, kid.
That's got to be a 7ism right there. You wouldn't tell
everything's fine.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, the first thing that came into my head was just say like everything's gonna work out. Like it's all fine.
Wow.
There you go. Positive reframe.
Well, with me, I think it would be, but advice never helps, right? It's very useless. But I would be ready to be more patient with myself, with my process, and with others.
Question I had for the 7s is, when are we going to get together and party?
No.
All right.
I don't know if this is
happens.
I don't know if these are the 7s that we want.
Okay. We might need to interview a few more 7s for that.
Boring.
We need some 7-wing 8s up in here.
I'm already thinking I'm already thinking about the next sevens we're gonna interview.
Yeah, like these aren't the party animals.
I've been thinking about that the whole time.
Too proper and too self-critical.
Oh, we are so frustrating.
Give me the
You're
stereotypical
disappointing them.
sevens. Thank you very
I
much.
don't care. I don't care.
I don't care.
Everything's fine.
I just want you guys to know that this call was a failure.
Yeah.
Oh.
Made us feel bad.
Okay, we're not funny.
Absolutely boring.
Funny.
Nothing
no.
interesting happened.
No,
Nothing
don't feel
exciting.
sad. No.
I didn't learn anything. It was just
Nothing.
blah.
Please, don't cry. Just
It
don't
was-
cry. As long as you don't cry, I'll be fine.
I'm in pain. I am in pain.
No.
The sun is setting. It's getting dark.
Oh, it's already dark here. I don't know.
I didn't think this would be the most boring call that we
It
ever.
just feels like it feels like my body is just like encased in cement and I can't go anywhere and there's food around me that I can't eat.
No
That's
options.
pretty
You have
normal
no
for
options.
John. I think.
No options.
Yeah, that's like my Saturday night.
You guys single-handedly killed our podcast with one call.
You know, I think that sevens, they run away from themselves even more than nines, right? Because the podcast with nines, they were so excited to say everything. They were so invested. And
Yeah.
me and her, we are like, yeah.
Actually, really, that's a really good point. That's a really good point.
Yeah.
The definite sense of individuality is part of it, right?
Oh yeah, they're self-referencing versus other referencing.
Mhm.
That's true.
I think your point about how nines were like so forthcoming and self-revealing, and we did 3 fucking calls on it. You know, it was like all. Whereas the 7 thing, not that y'all are not revealing, but there's a little bit more like, well, this is how it is.
Yeah.
You know, it's like this is what's up. This is how it goes. This is how I feel about it. Yeah, the 9 call is a really good contrast where it was like, here are all the textures of every little impression and the senses and the way it enters my body and goes through this long, elaborate sort of contraption process to get to somewhere else. And yeah, so very interesting.
It's seen versus not seen. Like the 7 is just out there being seen, right? Generally speaking.
The major themes of this podcast is shitting on 9s.
As we make them great again.
Yeah. Anyway, well, thank you, 7s, for being here.
Yeah, thank you.
Oh, it
We
was
did
fun.
have fun. We had
No,
some
you
fun.
didn't.
We had very limited amounts of fun.
Yeah, I was disappointed.
I was frustrated.
Well, I started feeling restless when you guys started talking about 9s.
Yeah, I
So-
figured that was coming.
Far more interesting type to discuss than.
All right.
All right,
All
guys.
right.
All
Bye.
right, later.
Thanks for coming on.
Bye.
Thanks. Thank you.